Hi, I'm Gary Collins. How well did you sleep last night? Did you find yourself tossing and turning? Did you wake up feeling tired and achy? If so, I've got great news about a new and better way to sleep on air. It's the revolutionary Select Comfort Airbed. And now you can get the whole story in this free catalog and video. Inside, you'll discover a mattress so comfortable and supportive, we guarantee you a better night's sleep. Plus, you can adjust firmness on both sides of the bed at the touch of a button. Unlike metal coils that can create pressure points and water beds that can bend your spine, Select Comfort contours to your body. So, find out why over 1 million Americans, including me, are waking up to Select Comfort. Call for your free catalog and video today.
To get all the exciting details on this new and better way to sleep on air, including your free Select Comfort Airbed catalog and a free sleep video, call toll-free 1-800-547-8383. That's 1-800-547-8383.
Tonight on a 2-hour biography Saturday, performing was in her blood, legend in her destiny. But the colors of her rainbow weren't always so bright.
They literally worked her to death.
A rare inside look at the dynamo who lived to put on a show. Judy Garland on Biography Saturday, tonight on A&E.
Where were you when the first man walked on the moon?
I really don't know.
Where were you the day of the Immaculate Reception?
I really don't know.
Where were you the day FYI was launched?
Right here in the shop.
FYI, the first and only all-local advertising channel, is now available in your area. Call 920-1195 to find out how you can advertise your business on FYI.
Most people think you have to go to a hospital for an MRI. Well, not anymore. Highfield's Open MRI has the strongest open magnet in Pittsburgh, giving you the most accurate reading possible. Their technologists will put you at ease and help you every step of the way. And they have plenty of free parking.
Ask your doctor to schedule your next MRI at Highfield Open MRI, conveniently located in Greenwich. Get the most accurate readings without the inconvenience of going to a hospital.
Did I mention they accept all major insurance?
A&E Home Video proudly presents the mystery special you've just seen for $29.95 plus shipping and handling. To order, call 1-800-423-1212 or visit our online store at mysteries.com.
Your son will be taken from you at 12 o'clock tomorrow, the 29th.
In a race against time,
Captain Hastings and I will be away until tomorrow. Hold the castle.
will Poirot or the kidnapper strike first? It's a mystery to die for on Poirot. Tonight at 10, 9 Central on A&E.
Port Royal, Jamaica. At one time, it had the dual distinction of being England's largest port in the New World and the wickedest place on earth. A bawdy hangout for buccaneers and wenches. Its teeming streets sparkled as much from pirate plunder as they did from the Caribbean waters. Then, in one violent instant, on June 7th, 1692, it all came to a sudden end. In what many called God's punishment for the town's notorious ways, an earthquake, followed by 3 tidal waves, plunged Port Royal and all its silver and secrets to the depths below. Ever since, underwater explorers have made this sunken den of iniquity their first port of call. Treasure, Sin City, Jamaica. To the casual eye, it may look like nothing more than a sleepy little fishing village, typical of those found throughout the Caribbean. But Port Royal is different. Beneath its waters lies a unique time capsule, a sunken city more than 300 years old.
Port Royal is the most important underwater archaeological site in the Western Hemisphere. There's more history and archaeology down there than 50 or 100 shipwrecks all combined.
The history of Port Royal's sunken city, its legendary rise, its catastrophic fall, and promising rebirth, begins in the middle of the 17th century when European nations fought over possession of land in the New World.
It's hard to underestimate the importance of the Caribbean in that period. The Caribbean was the Wild West for Europe. It was the frontier. And the pirates and the privateers, the buccaneers, they were the vanguard of the expansionist countries and responsible for achieving nationalist aims and also for a lot of the immigration.
If the Caribbean was Europe's Wild West, then Port Royal was its Dodge City, a boom town full of pirates, prostitutes, and purveyors, and where silver and gold were as plentiful as rum. Its rapid growth began just after England seized Jamaica from Spain in 1655. The British Crown, seeking to prevent the island from being retaken, immediately built Fort Charles, the first of 6 defenses, and one of the few buildings that would withstand the Great Quake. The Crown also recruited a cutthroat class of seafaring souls to harass Spanish ships and settlements in the Caribbean. The response was overwhelming. They came from as close as the island of Tortuga, where the infamous Brethren of the Coast, or Buccaneers, were kicked out by the Spanish, and from as far away as France, Holland, and of course, England. Those who accepted official commissions were called privateers. Those who operated independently were pirates. Either way, these rough-and-ready men formed a fearless fleet and made Port Royal their base of operations.
Port Royal became a pirate haven, pirate heaven really, because it lay at the center of the Caribbean, and the English wanted to dominate the Spanish shipping lanes. Spain was wealthy but weak, and England and the other European powers wanted their share of the New World riches. And Jamaica was a wonderful location, and Port Royal an even better one, on the south side of the island, with a wonderful sweeping quay that formed a natural harbor that could easily hold 500 ships.
Nearly everyone, it seems, in Port Royal was a pirate at one time or another. Protecting the island in exchange for plunder was too good an offer to refuse.
Being a pirate was a very opportunistic way of making a living. People would do it off-known, and so it wasn't that you was a pirate exclusively. You might be working in a tavern in Port Royal, and then one of the merchants is fronting the money for an individual, and they're going to go off on a raiding one of the coastal Spanish towns, and so you would go with them. But then when you came back, well, you know, you would just go back to your normal job. So it was an occupation that people crisscrossed back and forth out all the time.
Commodore Christopher Mings, a British naval officer and a privateer, brought in Port Royal's first Great Haul. More than 20 chests filled with silver coins and gems worth £500,000. His tactics earned him the nickname El Diablo, the devil from the Spaniards. These hand grenades help explain why. Mings and his successors used them as part of their arsenal to terrorize Spanish vessels carrying trade goods from Europe and the Orient. The iron balls filled with gunpowder were lit with a fuse, then tossed onto the deck of a galleon. The explosion caused death and injury. When the smoke cleared, the Spaniards surrendered their silk and silver. The practice proved remarkably successful. There were no serious attempts by Spain to retake Jamaica, and everyone got rich. Within 7 years of Port Royal's establishment, so much gold and silver had poured into its coffers from piracy that there was more running cash there, proportionate to the population, than in London. A resident observed, "The town, being as it were the storehouse or treasury of the West Indies, is always like a continual mart or fair, where all sorts of choice merchandises are daily imported." As this salvaged Japanese sword suggests, the markets of Port Royal were a cornucopia of plunder and contraband, a place where anything from Oriental objects of art to African slaves could be had for a price.
Any of the material that was coming in through piracy into Port Royal within 2 or 3 days was now in the hands of the merchants. And so it's the mercantile industry of Port Royal that actually made it the wealthiest English town in the New World.
Port Royal was also the most populous English town in the New World. Bigger than Boston, it boasted a population of between 6,000 and 8,000 people. A brass menorah recovered from a sunken synagogue reflects their diversity. At a time when the British colonies of North America were largely single-faith enclaves, Port Royal supported Jewish, Quaker, Catholic, and Anglican houses of worship. The local clergy's faith, however, was sorely tested. 1 out of every 4 buildings in town was either a brothel or a tavern, prompting one reverend to condemn Port Royal as the most wicked and sinful place on earth. The pirates' decadent ways were indeed legendary. When they returned from their adventures, they were only too eager to blow their booty, indulging their every vice. According to an early history of Jamaica, wine and women drained them of their wealth to such a degree that in little time, some of them were reduced to beggary. Port Royal's most celebrated prostitute, Mary Carton, was likened to a barber's chair. No sooner was one out than another was in. The governor of Port Royal commented that the Spaniards wondered much at the sickness of our people until they knew the strength of our drinks, but then wondered more that they were not all dead.
Port Royal, the wicked city, was noted for its drinking, debauchery, gambling, etc. And of course, these guys imbibed from morning to night. And a lot of guys made their own drinks, especially the rum, which was called Kill Devil's rum. And a lot of times it was mixed with gunpowder. And in the house of a David Owens that we worked in, we found his still. This was used for making rum. Of course, it was heated under here, and stuff was distilled and put in onion bottles like you see here, so named because of the shape. And in this particular house, we found several hundred of these onion bottles. A lot of them were still sealed. We had used hypodermic needles and got an idea what the contents were. And these guys didn't mess around just with drinking with little small glasses or jiggers. They used big things like you see here. This is a German beer stein made of stoneware, or you could call it a tankard. It's actually a shape of a tankard. Some people call them flagons. And so you can imagine, it would take 2 of these bottles just to fill one of these. And when a guy was drunk or came back from a new sortie where he captured a whole bunch of treasure, they'd go down with barrels, running down the street with barrels, and insist everybody had to take a drink. And they filled this thing to the brim and said, chug-a-lug. And could you imagine drinking that much rum? You just pass out and fall on your bippy. So those were the great days to live. Too bad I couldn't have been there myself.
If there was one man who personified Port Royal's raucous social scene, he was Henry Morgan, pirate extraordinaire. He didn't just raid ships, he invaded countries. His exploits, more than anyone else's, would give Port Royal its mythic aura. Treasure will continue in a moment here on A&E.
In a world of opportunity, how do you find a financial advisor who's right for you? Do you want one who works for the oldest company or the youngest?
Do you want one with the fastest growing company? Or the most deeply rooted in tradition? Or do you want one whose company pioneered the concept of financial planning? The first to offer a client bill of rights? The one who simply listens to you, like you are the only investor in the world. Raymond James, you first. For a no-obligation portfolio review, call our toll-free number, 866-YOU-FIRST, or click on RaymondJames.com to find the Raymond James financial advisor nearest you.
This beautiful little girl is Maria. She lives overseas with her family in this horrible slum. Maria must walk these rocky, filthy streets barefoot because her family is so poor. They can't even afford a pair of shoes. Hello, I'm Walter Coppage for Children International. Please, call the number on your screen now. We'll send this free, no-obligation information kit with a photo and family history of a little boy or girl who needs you. You'll learn how you can give one special child overseas, like Maria, a pair of shoes, and so much more.
Then if you decide to become our sponsor, your monthly gift is only $15. Your $15 will help provide medical care, clothing, emergency food, essentials for a good education, and more.
But remember, there is no obligation and the information kit is absolutely free. So please, call now.
Call 1-800-713-6767. That's 1-800-713-6767.
An A&E special presentation.
Mom, I want to be a star.
They were America's angels.
I was short, fat, with red hair and freckles.
Who learned early how to run with the big boys.
And I took 2 cheerleaders to the prom.
But in their race to fame, childhood was a luxury they couldn't afford.
They got what they needed from me, and now it's over. Those are very tough pills to swallow.
Child Stars, tomorrow on A&E.
We now return to Treasure here on A&E. Of all the pirates who made the base in Port Royal, none was more famous than Henry Morgan. He had come to Jamaica from Wales as an indentured servant, but soon took up freebooting. His exploits on the high seas made him the most celebrated and feared pirate of the 17th century.
He's separated from other pirates because he was a brilliant tactician. He was courageous, many of them are, but in spite of the fact that he often had fallings out with the men of his company, he was incredibly successful.
Morgan's expeditions rivaled those of any nation's army of the period. His most ambitious raid took place in 1670 when his force of 2,000 buccaneers invaded Panama City, the main depository of Spanish gold and silver on Central America's Pacific coast.
They made an incredible trek through the jungle. They didn't take any stores with them. They counted on finding food. They didn't. They almost starved to death. The men were actually cutting up their shoes and boiling the shoe leather and their pieces of their leather pouches to eat.
When Morgan's force finally arrived in Panama City, a desperate battle ensued in which fleeing Spanish soldiers burned the city down and loaded its treasures onto departing ships. Once in control, Morgan's men tortured residents until they revealed where they had hidden their valuables. The booty piled up quickly: silver plate, gold ingots, and 750,000 pieces of 8.
When they got back to the Caribbean coast, again at great cost to life, men dropping of disease and jungle fever, there was a falling out. After all that effort, there were only 200 pieces of 8 per man. When Morgan sailed off ahead of some of the men, they felt that he had skimmed off the best for himself.
The men may have been referring to these pieces. Rarely put on public view, they are known as Morgan's silver, believed to be the only known plunder from the raid on Panama City. Upon his return to Port Royal, Morgan was hailed as a conquering hero, but King Charles was not pleased. England was now at peace with Spain. The Spanish king threatened to declare war if those who destroyed Panama City went unpunished. In response, King Charles imprisoned the colonial governor who approved Morgan's venture. But a different fate awaited the popular pirate.
The British Crown really needed to get rid of the pirates at this point because they were developing their own commercial, viable colonies, and the pirates were becoming an embarrassment. And so what a better way to catch pirates than to set a pirate to do it?
The king knighted Morgan and appointed him lieutenant governor of Jamaica. By day, he sat in judgment of his fellow buccaneers. But at night, he secretly arranged for them to continue their trade for a price. But it was Sir Henry who ultimately paid it.
It must have been extremely difficult for Morgan to have been the buccaneer par excellence and then have to sit in judgment on petty pirates and buccaneers. And he sank into debauchery and drunkenness and was a kind of a shambling old mess at the end. But this is the story of piracy, and it's certainly the story of Port Royal, which was brash and bright for a while and then was extinguished.
Morgan died a bitter, broken alcoholic in 1688. A short poem mourned the passage of the man and his times. You was a flyer, Morgan. You was the lad to crowd when you was in your flagship. But now you're in your shroud. Morgan's era was over, but Port Royal continued to thrive into the early 1690s as a pirate haven.
Sometimes there were as many as 150 buccaneer pirate ships right in here, and of all different nationalities. I mean, we're talking about people who were plundering in the Red Sea, plundering off of Madagascar, all around the world. They all came here.
But the boom could have gone bust at any moment, not from sudden political changes, but rather from geological shifts. Port Royal was precariously situated on a thin spit of land at the tip of the Palisados Peninsula.
It's unconsolidated sand with the water table of 1 foot to 2 feet beneath it. And so they build this town up on it, and you can't dig foundations for the houses because you hit the water table too quickly.
As a result, Port Royal has always been vulnerable to natural disasters. Just how much can be seen in this structure, the Giddy House. It tipped over in an earthquake in 1907 and got its name from the sense of disorientation it induces in those who enter. It's nothing, however, compared to what Port Royal experienced back in June 1692.
The denizens of Port Royal were no strangers to catastrophe. They were frequently beset by hurricanes. They'd had an earthquake 4 years earlier, a minor one. But the morning of June 7th was frightening to those few people who were up really early and saw that the sea was strangely glassy. And as the morning wore on, it was terribly sultry. The air was very heavy. And the sky turned a brassy color. Shortly before noon, there was an absolutely apocalyptic event.
In many places, recounted a survivor, the earth cracked, opened, and shut with a motion quick and fast. And of these openings, 200 or 300 might be seen at a time. In some of these, people were swallowed up. In others, they were caught in the middle and pressed to death. And in others, the heads only appeared, in which condition the dogs came and ate them.
Here you have 2,000 buildings, and all but about 160 slid into the sea in a matter of seconds because there were also 3 tidal waves, and almost all the shipping in the harbor got all freaked up and thrown on top of the buildings, and it's really scary. It's like some of these Hollywood movies, but this actually happened to these people.
Perhaps the most compelling account of the earthquake is etched on the headstone of Louis Galdi in the graveyard of St. Peter's Church. He was swallowed up in the great earthquake, by another shock thrown into the sea, and miraculously saved by swimming until a boat took him up. Galdi was one of the few to survive. He went on to become a church warden. The fate of his fellow citizens must have given him cause for prayer. 2,000 people, about a third of Port Royal's population, died immediately in the disaster. Approximately the same number perished in the following weeks from diseases caused by the rotting of unburied corpses. The town itself was devastated. 33 acres, nearly 2/3 of Port Royal, collapsed into the sea. Gone was everything from 5 of the island's 6 forts to Henry Morgan's grave. Even in its decimated state, Port Royal's notorious reputation survived. Looters roamed the streets, cutting off the fingers of the dead to more easily pilfer their rings. Others dove into the water, recovering what they could from the rubble below. Clergymen preached this catastrophe of biblical proportions was God's punishment for Port Royal's wicked ways. Perhaps they were right. The town was never the same. Though rebuilt, it was hit by a series of hurricanes and fires that drove many residents to relocate to Kingston, a new settlement that became the island capital. Scientists, however, have another explanation for the cause of the disaster.
The key to the destruction at Port Royal is the fact that it's on this unconsolidated sand. And when you get unconsolidated sand like that and in a major earthquake, the violent shaking suspends every particle of sand with water momentarily. So what is firm foundation ground at one point now is just a liquid. It's just like water.
Whether by liquefaction or God's wrath, the earthquake turned Port Royal into an instant time capsule. Like Pompeii and Herculaneum, Roman cities buried by a volcano in 79 AD, Port Royal was now that rarest of archaeological phenomena, a catastrophic site.
The thing about Port Royal that makes it so special and unique is the fact it's the only sunken city in the New World. There's not another one like it because of its historical importance and the extremely good preservation present at the town. It's the dream of any nautical archaeologist to excavate.
Edwin Link was the first nautical archaeologist to make that dream come true. In 1959, under the auspices of the National Geographic Society and the Smithsonian Institution, he led an expedition to survey the sunken city. Link conducted his work about 100 yards offshore, near a buoy known as the Church Beacon. Legend holds that it marks the site where St. Paul's Church sank in the earthquake. Beneath the buoy, Link recovered a wealth of artifacts, none more intriguing than this pocket watch. An X-ray photograph of the face reveals traces of its vanished hands, stopped at 11:43.
It's probably the first time in the history of archaeology that the actual time of the destruction is actually recorded with frozen hands on a watch dial.
Link's expedition literally put old Port Royal on the map and changed the minds of skeptics who believed that because of reconsolidation, a natural landfill process, there was little, if anything, left of the sunken city.
Link's greatest contribution was the fact that he proved that there was a sunken city down there and that it had great merit to have somebody have a bigger project.
That somebody was Bob Marks, an underwater archaeologist. He would lead his own expedition 5 years later and recover enough artifacts to rival the plunder of any Port Royal pirate. Treasure will continue in a moment here on A&E.
Mario Perillo, Mr. Italy, with fantastic news. Take a Perillo tour and get free domestic airfare from over 50 U.S. cities. Choose among Perillo's 10 best-selling tours from the Alps to Sicily, first-class or deluxe hotels, major cities or romantic hill towns, fully escorted, yet lots of free time, and your domestic airfare free. For a free Perillo brochure, see your travel agent or call 1-800-854-4000 now.
This is DirecTV, the #1 digital satellite entertainment service. Now available with the $200 mail-in rebate. Order today and get more channels with 100% digital quality picture and sound. It could cost less than what you currently pay. You'll get access to premium channels like HBO, Stars, and Showtime. Exclusive sports subscriptions, plus your top local channels, and up to 55 pay-per-view choices every day. Call now to take advantage of this $200 mail-in rebate. Work the numbers. A DirecTV system and standard installation from DirecTV costs about $200. So after the rebate, it costs practically nothing. Just call and order today. You'll get a DirecTV system delivered with professional installation. So call now for a $200 mail-in rebate. Hurry, offer ends soon. We love this stuff even more than you do.
I miss that guy with all my heart. We shared classes together, we survived the lectures, and we took the tests, and we told the jokes. But now I must look at the empty desk, with an empty heart, unable to rest. While all the other kids laugh and play, I only remember that one day when my best friend Jeff was taken away. I love you, Jeff.
You know, to make it in rock and roll, you need one big hit. To make it on Biography, you need a story. Patti LaBelle. She went from choir girl to Lady Marmalade. Ted Nugent to Madman. Try Total Square.
Hippies would have fun with ridiculing my guns and my hunting.
Rick Springfield, soap star, rock star.
They got past the trauma of actually having spent some time in jail.
The hitmakers you thought you knew.
Biography Hitmakers Week, all next week at 8, 7 Central, only on A&E.
We now return to Treasure here on A&E. Edwin Link's 1959 expedition to Port Royal and his recovery of the pocket watch indicating the time of the earthquake intrigued many with the probability of more treasures to be found below. Perhaps no one was more curious than Bob Marks, an underwater archaeologist imbued with the lore of the sunken city.
When I was 5 years old, I read a book about a guy who claimed that he walked the streets of Port Royal. The cathedral bell was chiming. Skeletons were in the taverns with flagons in their hands, drinking the booze. And I read that over and over and over, and I kept saying, one of these days, I'm going to go there and do that.
That day came in 1964, when a development company announced plans to turn Port Royal into a Caribbean version of colonial Williamsburg. That meant dredging for cruise ship piers, right where the sunken city was located. When Marks heard that news, he took action.
I was able to convince the governments, with the help of the Organization of American States and UNESCO, both organizations which I was consultant to on underwater archaeology, to save all the goodies down there. And little did I know at the time that I'd spend the next 4 years around the clock working and only do a tiny part of the site, like 5% of the overall site.
Marks excavated that portion of the site most threatened by the proposed dredging. Working in depths as low as 25 feet, he used an airlift, a long vacuum-like tube silt onto a barge, where small artifacts collected on a screen. Marks didn't know what he would find, but he had a dream.
From the very, very beginning, when I first started the excavation here at Port Royal in 1964, I dreamt about, let's find Henry Morgan's grave, because we knew he was buried at Port Royal, or at least his tombstone.
Marks's quest wasn't easy. Sewage from Kingston severely limited underwater visibility. Sharks lurked nearby. Cave-ins and earthquakes threatened.
You're working in a cesspool, but the information that you're getting, you can't get anyplace else. So we put up with it day in, day out. And every morning, you know, I'd wake up so excited, say, okay, what am I going to find today?
Apparently, a lot. Marks may not have found Morgan's grave, but he and his divers seem to have salvaged everything else. They recovered thus far the largest haul of artifacts from the sunken city, in the millions by Marks's own estimate, all of which fit his definition of treasure.
Treasure is anything of importance to mankind that comes out of the sea or from a land site. So treasure doesn't have to be gold and silver. It's something that's interesting for people, and it's something that adds to the knowledge of the past. That's what treasure is.